we start by explaining what a function is. Okay. So in our own understanding, what do we think a function is? Layman understanding. If you hear function, what comes to your mind? Before we talk about function in programming. Okay? If you hear function, what comes to your mind? Okay? Well, function is basically performing the performance of a task. It can be called what? Function. The ability to do something, or the performance of what? A task can be called what? A function. Okay? But in programming, function is not just about the ability to do something or the performance of a task. Okay? But function in programming is basically talking about bunch of codes that are written together to be able to achieve a single goal, okay, or perform a single task, or a system of codes written together or logic written together to achieve what? A single task. Okay, these tasks can be to add two numbers, can be to multiply four numbers. Okay, the whole goal is that this must run together as a system in order to do what? Achieve these tasks. Okay, that is what a function is. Now, functions accept what we call parameters. Okay, functions accept parameters, and or argument is another way of using it. So either you hear me say argument or you hear me say parameters. So a function accepts parameters or arguments. Then functions can return values or not return values. Okay, function can return values or not return values. Now, if a function returns a value, the value can either be any of the data types, or if it doesn't return any value, the return value by default is what? None. Okay, none is the return value for any function that doesn't have a specified return value. Okay, so that is that. So again, function is a block of code or system of codes that perform a given task, right? And it can accept parameters or accept values or arguments, and then return something for performing the task. So for the sake of our class, we are going to start by creating a very simple function that can add two numbers. Then we move to a function that can multiply. Then we move to a function probably that can perform beyond just adding, probably a function that can maybe loop through numbers and then based on specific things. In Python, to create a function, we first have to do what? Start with the def keyword. Okay? To create a function, the first thing we write is def keyword, then the name of our function. Name of function. Okay, name of function. Then followed by parentheses. Okay? I can ignore the space, parentheses, then column, then function what? Logic. Okay? Function logic. Right? Or function body in some cases. Alright, so that is the structure of a function. Now, if my function should accept parameters, then I can add my params. Alright, params. Okay? Params, I think there should be an M at the end. Params. Okay, so this is what a Python dictionary will look like. Alright, so I'm going to make it a comment basically so that we can start off from here. Okay, so every Python dictionary starts somewhat like this. Okay, the print statement we are using to output things starts like this. Okay, somewhat like this. So let's basically start by creating a function that will do what? Display two numbers to the screen, basically, or output the sum of two numbers. The first thing is what? Define the function name, keyword, then the name of the function, in our own case, sum two numbers. Okay. Now I can write it this way using, this is Pascal camel case. right? Or I can use our snake case, okay, which is Python's default way of writing it. But for the sake of simplicity, I will use this one for this one, and then the rest I will use snake case. Okay. Now I'm expecting two numbers. Okay, so this will be number one, my first parameter or my first argument. Okay, so my first argument, then this will be the second one, right? Then all I'm going to do for now is basically print n underscore 1 plus n underscore what 2. Right, so num1 plus num2, that is all my function is doing. It's very simple as that. Okay, again, we define the function, you say the name of the function, we are accepting two parameters or two arguments. Okay, that's what we defined. Then we are printing the value. Okay, we are printing the value. So that is all we did. Okay, then I can.
Sorry, the name of the function is sum two numbers.
Yes, sum two numbers.
So why are you not using underscore?
I can use underscores. Like I said, you can use this same as variable names. It's left for me, but I'm going to use underscore in the next one. But it can be any of these. Okay, Python will not scream at us. So now one unique thing about, well, let's continue. I execute my function. Okay, I have defined the function. Right now the function is working, but just like every other thing, the function will not just start working without being called upon. You don't just ask your younger brother to go and get you something by thinking of it in your mind. Okay? You can't just say, hey bro, go buy me this, okay, without thinking of it in your mind, just thinking about it, and the guy will just go and buy it. Doesn't work that way. So this is like thinking about, I want to send my younger brother to go and get me something. Okay? Now the actual calling him to send him to go and get you that thing is what makes him go get you that thing, right? So the same way, we are going to call our function to actually perform the task that we just defined. Okay? Without calling our function, we can't perform the task, basically. So I'll go ahead to say sum two numbers, okay, which is me calling the function. Now, remember our function takes in num1, num2, okay? So our function takes in num1, num2. So for the sake of this one, our num1 is 2 and our num2 is what? 3. So our output should be what? 5, okay? So I will execute it and I'm getting what? 5. So this is me creating a function in Python that can add two numbers, basically. So we're able to do this in 2 lines of code or 3 lines of code at most. Okay? Create our function or define our function, then call our function and get our value, basically. Okay? Now this is not the return value. This is me just displaying the value. The reason why you are seeing 5 here is because I'm printing 5 here. If I did not print 5 and I just said something like, let's say we are going to add 2, okay, to this. Instead of saying print, I'm going to create a variable that I call results is equals to n on num1 plus num2 plus 2. Okay, so in this case I'm adding 2 to whatever I have. Right, so I'm not going to just get the sum of it. I'm going to get the sum of it plus 2. Okay, so let's just say that 2 is just our bias, a way of just some constant. Okay, I will re-execute this and I will re-execute this. Now I'm still getting 5. That is because at the end of the day, I'm not returning anything from my function. my function is not giving me the result of the second operation that we're doing because I'm not returning it. All I'm saying is I'm displaying the output here, but over here, this particular operation is being stored here, and there is no way I'm getting it out unless I choose to print it within the function. Okay, but for me to work with this function, it's not going to be possible. Now let's try and see print.
Okay, what did you name the function?
Still the same name. I just added this one just to explain this concept. I just added something to it. It's still the same function name. Okay, still the same function name. Sum two numbers. I'm going to remove this one later on after the explanation. Okay, so that it just.
I'm saying like
Yeah.
without the syntax.
Yeah. Okay. That's the name of the variable for holding this. Okay, so it's like result. Okay, so if I print sum two numbers and I pass in 5, 6, okay, and I execute, I'm getting 11 and none. I'm getting what? 11 and none. The reason I'm getting 11 in the first place is because of I'm printing here. Okay, that is the reason I'm getting 11 in the first place. Without that print statement, I will only be seeing what? None, because I'm not returning any value from my what? From my function. Okay, I'm not returning any value from the what? From the function. So the default return value is what? None, meaning void, nothing. Okay, none. So in the second function you're going to create, you're going to see how to return a value from a function, not just to display the function. Okay, and because of this none, if I assign this function to a variable, what I'm storing in the variable is basically what? None. Okay, so that is the idea. So let's say we want to just call this function, get the value from it, and use it and do something else. Okay, how will you achieve something like that? Again, we define our function. Now this will be power function. Let's call this raise to power. Okay, so it's going to take the base and the power. Okay, the base and the power. Now I don't want to print. I'm going to just return a value. So this is result. It can be anything. I'm using result for convenience. Okay, it can be anything. All right, it can be C. But remember, we said we don't name things A, B, C, D just for naming sake. So that's why I'm just using results. Okay, is equals to. Now, our operators. How do we do raise to power again? Can you remember? Okay.
Raise to power up arrow key.
Up arrow key, right? So we do this, then we do what? Power. Okay, so what this simply means is something like the base, then power what? Whatever. So if this is 2 and this is 10, we get 10 to power 2 to the power what? 10, basically. That's what we are saying here. Alright? So because I'm saying I'm not printing, okay? I'm not printing. Then I'm going to call the function. Remember, the function does not work until you what? Call it. Okay, so I'm going to say something like raise to power. And for something very simple, I will say 2, 2. Okay, so this should be like 4, suppose. And then I'm going to print this one. I'm going to print this one. and at the end of the day, we'll see if you have a value or not. I'm still getting in none. I'm still getting none. So for me to fix this none issue, I have to introduce something new, okay, which is known as the return statement. Okay, now I can now return results. Okay, so without the return statement or return keyword, which is the right word for it, return keyword, it will keep saying return value none, return value none. So return tells it, okay, now this is what I should what expect back. Okay, so give this value back to the what, to the system or to the compiler or whatever, okay, or interpreter. Give the system the value back. So now I will execute this again. I'm getting what? What am I getting? 0.
Try using double.
Yeah, this should be this rather. Yeah? Yeah, it should be this. Yeah. So it should be this. Yeah. Okay. So then this is we get now what our value. Basically. Without the return statement, okay, without the return statement, we will get none return. Okay. Again, we started from saying the DEF raised to power, base, and power. So we have our base as our first argument or first parameter. Then we have power as our second argument or second parameter. We can have more than these two, okay, just by adding an additional comma. Okay. Then we add another name, whatever we want to have more than this. Okay? But for now, let's stick to this. Then we can now proceed to add or raise to power. Okay, raise to power of this. Then return our value. Then get this in return. Okay. So that's that. Okay. Oh, then all. Alright. So you're going to create a function, a counter function. Okay? We're going to create a counter function that counts the occurrence of a given letter or word in a sentence. Okay? We're going to create a counter function that counts the occurrence of a given letter or word in a sentence. Then that'll be all. Okay? So let's see. Up to here, is it clear? Up to here, is it clear? Because it's very important that you understand this point. So you can now move over to creating a counter. So for us to create a counter, we have to think about it carefully. A counter requires us to have a loop and requires us to have something that we are checking. Okay, so we need conditions, we need loops. Okay, and we're going to see all this in a single function. Okay, so let's start. To create a counter, we start by defining the counter. Okay, counter. Now, this counter is going to take in a sequence. Okay, a sequence, and then it's going to take in a value, okay, that we are counting. Okay, taking in a sequence and a value that we are counting. Now, the first thing to do is to, we're going to build this like a real application, is to check if the sequence, okay, it's actually a sequence basically. Okay, length of sequence should be greater than what? 0. That is the first thing. If not, okay, now writing SQL. If not length greater than 0, Okay, return. Believe this should be the right format. Okay, okay. So I may return something like okay, let's go with incorrect sequence. Okay. So for now, let's go with this. So this is our first condition. We are checking if the sequence is longer than what 0. You don't want to loop over something that is not, that is practically one item. Okay. I can also do skip this one by using a try and a set to skip it. But for now, let's do this. So I'm going to say for I in sequence. Okay. Now I'm going to check if I is equal to value. Okay. Now I skipped something. Okay. I skipped something. And the thing I skipped is how do I keep track of how many values I've seen. Okay. So I'll call this value count and I will set it to 0. Okay. So this now if I is equal to value, okay, then I can increase the value count. Okay, so value count, okay, is now equals to value count plus 1. So I want to increase with 1. Okay, whatever the value count is, I want to increase it by 1. And this is a long way of writing this. No shorter way where I can just say plus equals 1. Okay, so but let's go with this. And when everything is done, all I'm going to do is to return value count. Okay, so this is my counter for this particular case. Okay, so this particular counter can count anything, whether a tuple or a, what's it called, a string or a list, can count virtually anything. Okay, so that is a counter, a functional counter. Okay, again, for us to use the application to work, we have to do what? Call it. Okay, I have to call a function for it to work. So go ahead to call our function. Let's say we define for this is str1. In this case we call okay, so we start with rugged. Okay, that will be the first thing we're going to look at. Rugged, then the list 1, we're going to have in our list we're going to have address. Okay, address and deep and there. Then we add another there. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do, I think let's go with just these two. So let's call the counter. Okay, and let's print. You can spell anything now. Very, very nice. print counter. Okay, now I'm going to pass in st1 and I'm trying to get the value what g. How many times did g occur? Okay, so this should give us 2. We are seeing that g occurred 2 times, so that should give us 2. Then the other one, I should see del 2 times as well. So that's the idea. Now we are counting strings and we are counting lists at the same time with one similar function. So if everything is working the way I expected it to work, okay, then I should have 2 again returned back to me. Okay, so and as you can see, we have 2 returned back to us. All right, so that is what a counter function looks like. This function is written in Python. Actually, we're just creating our own version. It was basically similar something. You can count anything with it. Okay? And your length is also doing something similar. The only difference is the length is not counting and checking against the value. The length is counting how many it is. You're just counting how many it is. Takes in one you loop and tries to count how many it is. Okay? So your assignment will be try to do this without using this if statement here and wrap this in a try block. Okay? So instead of using this if, use a try block, wrap this part, and then if it breaks, return incorrect sequence. Okay? That's that. We create the counter function using try block. Okay.